Okay, welcome to week one of mobile application development. Our first task is to get the software that we need for the course, get it installed, and make sure everything's working properly on your computer. We're going to use something called the Corona SDK, which gives us a virtual simulator of many different types of mobile device. So we can see how the programs that we write work and look on a variety of devices. Because unfortunately, they are not all the same. So step one, we need to go to the website coronalabs.com, which is in your syllabus and on Blackboard. There's a clickable link to it, or you can just go to your favorite web browser and type it in, coronalabs.com. Once here, you have to register with them in order to download the software, but it's very, very simple. You just plug an email address in here, click the download the free SDK. Depending on your internet, this will take a minute. And you'll have the option here. It may ask you to create a password depending on if you've been here before and things like that, or which page you actually get to. The Corona SDK is multi-platform, so it doesn't matter if you have a Mac, which I'm currently working on, or a Windows-based machine. You just click the appropriate operating system and then hit the download button, and it will download to your computer. This is roughly 60 megabytes or so on the Windows side and just under 100 on the Mac side. And just looking at that, you might be wondering why that is. Corona was developed first and foremost on a Mac for iOS, and it was later then brought over to Windows. So there are features within it that do not work on the Windows side, and we'll take a look at a couple of those throughout the semester, but for the most part, if it's not available on Windows, I'm not making you responsible for it. So I'm going to fast forward here for a minute till this is downloaded. Now on the Mac, it's going to install a little differently than on Windows, but I'll assume that you know how to install software. So your Corona simulator should look something like this. And that's the little phone that I'm dragging throughout my screen. Although when you first bring this up, it won't necessarily have this per se. Let me actually quit and go in. I was working on the week one assignment. So I go ahead and I start it, and there we go. You're going to see a welcome screen. It looks a little bit different on Windows, but for the most part, it is similar enough. You won't really have these recent projects list over here like I do, but that will build as we do stuff. So the main thing right over here, new project. We click on that, and we can let this help us a little bit in how we create our project. So like in week one, our project is Hello World version 2 or something like that. We have some templates that as we go further we will make use of, but for now, as we just learn some of the code commands and the syntax and how you do this, we're not going to rely on anything that's pre-built. We're going to basically start and format everything ourselves. Okay, so we're going to choose blank here. Over here on the right hand side of the form, we can select cell phone or tablet, just a random dimension that it starts with. We can change these at any time should it turn out we need more space, less space, whichever. We can also select the orientation of our device, whether it's portrait or landscape here. And you know, for the Hello World, it really doesn't matter, but I'm just going to leave it as upright. And then I hit next. Excuse me, sorry. And it's going to ask me now to choose a location on my computer where I want this to go. So I'm just going to throw it on my desktop. And just hit create, and it automatically makes me a folder. There you can see it on my desktop, Hello World V2. And I didn't really do anything yet, but there's my folder. And why that's important? Because when you submit assignments, now this one it really wouldn't matter because it's only one page of code. But when we use other assets such as sound or images or graphics that we create, those all have to be contained within the project folder for the project to work and also to turn it in. Okay, so by having the simulator automatically create a folder, we've taken care of that. Okay, so the next thing, I'm just going to click on Open in Editor. And that brings us to the second piece of software that you need to come up with. A text editor. Now this doesn't have to be anything fancy, and if you have Windows, you can use Notepad. The key here is any type of word processing application will work, but you don't want it to help. So like using Microsoft Word with its built-in spell checking and grammar and all the advanced features that it has is really not a good choice as a text editor because it will try to change your code. Notepad, however, doesn't have those advanced features. You can just type. Somewhere in the middle, there are different types of editors which have coding rules built in. Like in the syllabus, I've suggested one called Notepad++. If you just give that a quick search on the internet, it's spelled right. There we go, Notepad++. We just do a quick Google search. It will come up, although it wasn't the top result on my list, but there it is, Notepad++ Home. This is free. You can download it. And the nice thing about it, it color codes some things. So like if you see here on their sample, now this is not the coding language we're going to be using, but it doesn't matter. It recognizes different formats and things. So see how the word void is a different color and the while loop down here is blue to represent a command. So color coding in your text editor can be a very useful feature, but it's not 100% necessary. On the Mac side, I use something most of the time called Text Wrangler. And again, it's one of those that's kind of somewhere in the middle. Downside, it's only a Mac program. Okay, so what I have here, whenever you create your project in Corona and it creates you that folder and you tell it to open the editor, it also makes you what's called a main.lua document. Okay, the word main dot and then L-U-A. This is the format that all of our programs must take. The Corona simulator looks for that file in every project, and if it's not there, it won't run anything. Okay, so sometimes we'll only have a main.lua to link us to other things. In other cases, that will be our entire program. Okay, but you must have a main.lua, and no capitals, no spaces, just as you see it here on the screen, main.lua. So it needs to be saved by that, like that. And then what you see here with these dashes and things, these are comments. They're ways that we can annotate our code to provide sort of a outline or a reminder to ourselves and others so that we know possibly what we were thinking when we were writing a section of code or where we left off, because a lot of times you don't sit down and code for marathon sessions of hours and hours, and you have to try to remember what you were thinking, what you were trying to do when you left off the last time, and putting comments in can help. So like in Corona, it's just two dashes, and that makes a comment. So one of the things that I would like you to do at the top of each program is to place a small code section that has your name, the name of the assignment, and the date, either that you started it or that you turned it in, or something like that, so that I know whose it belongs to, and things like that, or it makes it easier to sort them when I'm grading and things like that. And then we just get some blank spaces, and we're ready to begin our code. Now I'm going to kind of skip ahead here for a section, or to kind of show what this week's assignment is. Once you have your editor working and Corona installed and working, that's the main focus of week 1, other than to get the textbook. Okay, and you can get the textbook, again, if you are, if you go to the Blackboard page for the course, and here it is. I have a couple different places where I have links to it. Right here in the welcome message, there's a link to Burton Media Group. If you go there, Dr. Brian Burton is the author of the text that we use. The text we use is called Learning Mobile App and Game Development with Corona. It's an ebook. It's fairly inexpensive as far as textbooks go. And one of the really nice things about this particular author and the publishing group, free updates for the life of the book. As you probably know, mobile devices have changed a lot in the last few years, and every few months the big companies like Apple and Samsung release a newer model. Those models change things, so how you make apps for mobile devices has to change along with that. You have your choice here of various formats for the book, PDF or EPUB. My personal opinion, which take it for what it's worth, I got the PDF, so if I needed to print it, I could. Some of the other formats don't let you do that. So you get the book, you download that onto your device or onto your computer, and then inside that, chapter 1 is what we're looking at. If I scroll down, I'm just going to go through so hopefully you can see it a little better. Page 14. Burton, for whatever reason, numbers the pages at the bottom. So when I say page 14, that's where I'm looking. In your reader, your Adobe Reader or whatever you use to look at PDFs or whatever, that page may not match up. Like if you look here where my cursor is right now, it's telling me that I'm on page 44. Okay, when I really want to be on page 14, that's where our assignment is. Hello World Part 2. Hello World is a traditional first assignment in computer programming classes because it was one of the first things that programmers actually got a computer to do way back when. There's a lot of information in chapter 1, but most of it is just involved with the setup and the understanding of the simulator and the text editor and programs and things to help you. There's a big list of text editors in the book and everything, so you're free to choose any of those. It's kind of personal preference. I have 6 or 7 installed on my computer. There are some that I like and some that I don't. For instance, I use a program called Outlaw when I'm doing things that are long and complicated because it has some features that help with that. Text editor is kind of short and to the point. It doesn't have too many extra features, so I don't need to worry about distractions or setup or things like that. I can just code. So when we find page 14 in the book, we read through this. It's going to kind of tell you about the structure of programs and stuff I just kind of glossed over in this video. But he goes into a little more detail, but starts off with creating a text object. And here's the code right at the top of page 15. So basically what you do is you copy these 2 lines into your code editor. Whichever one you've chosen, you save that, and then you return to the Corona simulator, and you yeah, let me get it so that it starts at the start screen. And now that we're looking for a project, we're not creating a new one, we hit open. And if mine decided, there we go. It's a little slow. I am working on an older Mac, but so it's on my desktop. Hello World. I find the folder. I click on main.lua. Now notice it put a whole lot of stuff in that folder. In addition to the one file that we need. For several weeks anyway, the rest of this stuff does not matter. So just kind of pretend like it doesn't exist. Don't delete it, but don't change too many of these things. Okay, unless you're following a tutorial or reading ahead in the book, because it does need all of these. Okay, so there's my main.lua. I click on it once, I hit the open. It opens in a simulator, and if I did everything correctly, and it doesn't look like I did. So I have to now figure out what I did wrong. Open. Oh, I know what I did. Okay. I have this in the wrong main.lua. There we go. That would be why. So one of the neat things that you can do with your simulator, and you can see I created a text object here with the words hello world. They showed up on my phone, my virtual phone screen. Now the rest of this command, 100 100 is the location. We'll talk about that in greater detail a little later. This next part is for the font, and I just put in native system font. So whatever the default font is on your computer, if you use this property right here, you'll get that. We'll take a look at this in just a minute. 24 is the size. So if I were to come in here and change that to 48 and resave, notice how the text got bigger. Now that can create a problem because where I've placed the location when the font is this big, we don't see it. So that's this 100 and 100. The first one is X, the second one is Y. Just like in math class when you did graphs, X and Y, X horizontal, Y is vertical. So I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Instead of 100, I'm going to tweak that and make it 150. There you saw the words move so you can see them. The second thing our code does is it takes that text object's name right here and we change one of its properties, which is the fill color. And initially it's 111, which gives us white. These three locations stand for red, green, and blue, and different varieties of that. Like if I make this a 0, that's going to change the color. So it's now a pinkish color if I do this. You can also put in, this is kind of representing percentages of red, green, and blue. So if I don't want green, if I don't want 0, I can put in like 0.5, and that will change it to a slightly lighter version of that color that I was just looking at, and so on. Now this annoying little thing that keeps popping up, at least on the Mac, I've been able to, on the Windows side, kind of move that off the screen so it doesn't bother me, but on the Mac side it pops up close to where your virtual phone is. This is sort of a line-by-line commentary or log of what your program is doing. So for instance, if I look carefully here, it told me it loaded the project from my desktop in this folder. And of course this doesn't really do anything, so I don't have any additional, but when we do later project, if you have any errors, they will pop up here. For instance, it tells me down here I have 2 errors in the code that I've written, which I really don't. But when we have an error when our program doesn't run, because if we really have an error, the simulator will not work. It will either create question mark here, or it will just pop up a window saying, you have code errors in line 7, or something like that. So there are some things that go on behind the scene that the console log keeps track of, that we don't have to worry about. So I know that my objects here have worked. Like I said, it's using my default system font. If I know the name of a font, like Arial, I can just put that into that space. And maybe if I'm quick enough, I can save this and load my simulator to see the change. Okay, so it looks slightly different, but that's probably my default system font. So let me try another font. There's a font in the Mac called Impact, which has much thicker letters. You can see that that looks very different now. The font, the appearance of the letters. The only thing you have to watch here is if you have custom fonts on your computer. For now, doing something like this, it will work on your machine, but it won't work when you send that code somewhere else. So like if you send me a project and you've used like the Batman font, and that's something that you got off the internet and it's not on every computer, I will see it as just generic text. Most of the time it won't crash, it will just substitute the system default font. Okay, so there's a couple ways we can just tinker with these two lines of code to make this hello world a little bit different. This line, the second line, will change the color of our text. The first line can change what it says. I can get rid of the world and do ACM. And as soon as I save it, it shows up in my simulator. So we can place this text anywhere on our screen simply by changing these two numbers. And even if we don't know what the bounding dimensions are, through trial and error, we can learn. Like for instance, if I make the Y value 1100 and save and go back there, I can just barely see the top of my letters down here because I've placed it off of my screen. There are instances where we might want to do that, but for the most part, stuff off your screen is not a good thing, especially if it's text. So I now know that 1100 is too far down the screen. There's another difference that you'll see. Y does not go up, it goes down. So for instance, if this were math, our origin would be right here in the bottom left corner, with this being our x-axis going across and our y-axis going up. But in fact, in mobile app programming, and not just in Corona, but in almost all of the app design software, it's set up this way. Our origin is actually here, the upper left corner. Positive x still goes to the right, but positive y moves down the screen. Okay, so it's an ordered pair. So if I were writing this in math class, it would be 150 comma 1100, or the x is 150, the y is 1100. Again, I know that that's a little too much. Let's see what I can actually get it at. Maybe 1000. There we go. So 1000 still keeps it on the screen, but 1100 is too much. So that will become more important when we start building more elaborate programs. So now, here I am. I've written Hello World version 2. It's done. It runs without error. Now I need to send it to Mr. Slope to turn in. Okay, so I'm just going to quit some of these things that are up on my screen. Here I am back at the Blackboard, the mobile app. Let me turn that off too. Page, the assignment information. Okay, so I've got a couple things in here. I've sent you a blank main.lua and a starter kit that has some just files that we may need later on. You can download this. It's not 100% essential, because if you follow that way that I showed you in Corona to start up, you'll always have a project folder. Okay, so week 1 assignment, Hello World version 2. It tells me the tutorial's on page 14. It says copy the code into your text editor and get it to run without error in the simulator. Place the main.lua there. Okay, so now, and if you're familiar with Blackboard, you kind of know what to do here. If you're not, the name of the assignment is the link. You click on that, it's going to take you in, show you how many points are possible. This is the section here that's really the important thing. Now, if I give, there are a couple of times throughout the semester where I'll give you like written questions or writing assignments. Most of those you can just click right here on Write Submission and type it directly into Blackboard. But if you need to attach a file, computer, I look on my desktop. There it is. When I click on it, it places it into the queue here. And all I have to do then is there's a submit button. So I'm sure I have that set up. I click submit and it turns it in. Okay. Most of these coding assignments, I will give you at least 2 opportunities to submit. So if you turn this in and then you say, oh wait, I wasn't done, or I found an error, or I wasn't, it was due on Sunday and I couldn't figure it out, so I sent you what I have, and you told me I could redo it. The vast majority of these will let you submit it more than once, okay? The only thing I would ask is change the folder name just slightly, if you would, so I know that it's a new version. But other than that, even that's not a mandatory thing. It just helps me stay a little more organized. But I get a notification every time something's turned into Blackboard, so I know who and when and all that. So that's where you would turn it in. You should be able to go to the My Grades section then, once I've graded things, and you'll see your grade. Like this Hello World assignment's out of 15 points. If it runs without error, you get all 15 points. The one thing about coding, I can't, in good conscience, hold you to, it has to be done a certain way. Now, that being said, there are multiple ways to solve most of the problems that you're going to be given. So if your code doesn't match what I do, that's okay. The bottom line is, does it work? Does it do what it was intended to do? Did it meet all the requirements? Now, if one of the requirements is to have something like a loop, and your program runs but it doesn't contain a loop, you probably won't get full points for that. But the opposite is also true in many cases. I've had students in the past just simply not turn things in because, oh, I couldn't get it to run, they say, or I really wasn't sure what to do. Well, in an online course, in order for me to help, you either have to reach out to me, or I can't just inherently know what's wrong. So even if you can't get something to work, you need to send me what you're working on if we get to the deadline. Number one, I do give partial credit, and number two, when I look at what you have, that will give me a plan of action to help you figure out either what you were missing or what was wrong. Coding is a strange thing, because one little thing out of place can stop the whole program from working. So missing a comma somewhere, or having a capital letter where it should be lowercase, those are things that are hard to find. But when a second set of eyes is looking, sometimes it helps. Okay, so don't not turn stuff in just because you didn't get it to work perfectly. A lot of these deadlines are flexible because I'm still learning what about coding. You're still learning my style and things like that. What I think might take a week might take 3. So that's why I said in the announcements, the syllabus is a guide, and those are the things I hope to get to during this semester. But if we get hung up somewhere and the majority of the class is having difficulty on a certain topic, we need to spend more time on some of that. So I'm not going to rush through this and say, well, we've got to get through chapter 15 no matter what. A lot of this builds on itself. So if you don't get chapter 8, when you move on to chapters 9 and 10, it's going to be even more challenging because the stuff in chapter 8 is assumed. So please use my email address. Please use the discussion board in Blackboard if you run into problems. And again, when I put up examples of past work, like for instance, if you look ahead here, you see in week 2, We've got a couple programming assignments coming up. Once I have those turned in, or the majority of them, I will post mine in a video where you can go through. I'll break down what I did, or if it's straight out of the book, a lot of times I won't do that because, you know, if yours didn't work, it's more likely something was copied wrong. But on a lot of the original assignments that I've put in, I will give you, you know, my version of it at some point, so you can kind of see how I attack that problem, which again may not be the exact same way that you did, and we can both be right. That's the great thing about coding. Okay, I've talked for long enough at this point. Again, if you run into any trouble at any point, email me. Use a discussion board. Don't wait till Sunday night at 10 o'clock because I guarantee I won't reply. Good luck. Happy coding.